peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
Thank you for finding time at being with us this afternoon. It is the 28th of September. The show is Diaspora Dispatches. We get to bring you the latest news from Africa, and we'll start with some news from Northern Africa, where France is slashing the number of visas issued to people from Algeria, Libya, and Morocco. A government spokesperson, Gabriel Attal, told Europe One Radio that it was a drastic and unprecedented decision made necessary by the refusal of the North African countries to take back nationals that France doesn't want and can't keep. He said there were dialogue, then there were threats, and today that is why they're carrying out this move. Immigration is likely to be a key issue in next year's presidential election. President Emmanuel Macron is widely expected to face off against the anti-migration far-right leader Marine Le Pen. And then U.S. President Joe Biden has nominated Dr. John Nkangosong to lead the well-resourced public health program aimed at combating HIV and AIDS, known as the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. Dr. Nkangosong is currently the head of the African CDC, the agency leading the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic in the continent. The $7 billion PEPFAR program is known for offering funding and treatment to governments meant for people who are living with HIV, the majority of them in sub-Saharan Africa. If approved, the Cameroonian-born virologist would be the first person of African origin to head the program. Then we head over to Guinea, and the latest is that the Guinea's military junta has barred its members from running in the next elections that will mark a return to civilian rule. It came after the junta announced on Monday a transitional charter that confirmed a military leader, Colonel Mamadou Doumbouya, as the president following the coup earlier last month. The charter also provides for a government The charter also provides for a government headed by a civilian prime minister and a national transitional council that will temporarily act as a parliament. The council will have 81 members drawn from society, including business leaders, political parties, religious organizations, diplomats, and professional organizations. They also are barred from running in the next local or national elections. At least 30% of the council members must be female and will include a president and 2 vice presidents. The council will decide on the length of the period in which it will govern before an election can be held to usher in a democratic government. The junta has been holding talks in recent weeks with the people from all walks of life to build a consensus on the country's future, including a time frame for a return to a civilian rule. And then we go to Sudan. And Sudan has not taken any significant steps to normalize relations with Israel since April, when its cabinet repealed a decades-long boycott of the country. Sudan's Foreign Minister Mariam Sadiq Al-Mahdi was quoted by the UAE-based media outlet as saying, Ms. Mahdi said a new parliament, which is set to be constituted, will deal with the issue. She added that improving relations with Israel was necessary to improved relationship with the United States, and said it was time to support for Sudan joining the World Trade Organization after nearly 2 decades of failed attempts. Last year, Sudan joined the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco in agreeing to normalize ties with Israel on the contentious issue of whether former President Omar al-Bashir will be handed over to the International Criminal Court to face war crimes charges. She said Sudan's joint civilian military transitional council, which rules the country, is divided over it. And then we go to Nigeria, where the Nigerian authorities say more than 60 people have been killed in a wave of attacks across the north of the country. More than 30 villagers died in a raid by bandits in Kaduna State. Criminal gangs attacked 5 towns and set fire to military camps in Sokoto, also in northwest. They killed 17 members of the security forces and 2 civilians. In the northeastern state of Borno, soldiers and vigilantes died when suspected Islamists fired rockets at their convoy and a military vehicle drove over an explosive device. And then we go to South Sudan. Health authorities in Pibor administrative area have raised an alarm over the possible outbreak of disease due to persistent rainfall and flooding. The area Minister of Health says the health facilities there have also run short of essential drug supplies. Some of the affected counties in the area include Bochala and parts of Pibor town. Every year, South Sudan experiences torrential rains and seasonal flooding, including disaster displacements. The United Nations says an estimated 380,000 people have been affected by flooding in 6 states since May, with Jonglei and Unity the most affected. And the latest from Mali is that the country's elections, meant to usher in a return to democratic rule set for next February, could be postponed by 2 weeks, 2 months, or a few months. Prime Minister Chonguel Kokal Maiga has told the French news agency AFP. The comments seem to confirm widespread fears of a possible extension of the military-led transition government. Mr. Maiga said it was better to organize peaceful elections recognized by all rather than to organize elections that will be disputed. Debate has been raging in Mali in recent months over whether the country's military ruler, Colonel Assimi Goïta, will honor a pledge to hold a referendum on a new constitution on 31st of October and general elections on 21st of February next year. A radio station based in the northern city of Gao recently said it was increasingly unlikely that the transition will be extended. The government could also use the planned withdrawal of French forces from the country to justify an extension of the transition period. The United Nations General Assembly last week, the Prime Minister accused France of abandoning Mali. At the United Nations Assembly last week, the Prime Minister accused France of abandoning Mali and said Bamako was seeking other security partners, referring to controversial negotiations with Russian paramilitary companies. Go to Ethiopia, and the country has decided to close its embassies in Egypt and Ireland due to financial constraints, which have been worsened by a long conflict in the Tigray region. Ethiopian ambassador to Egypt, Marcos Tekle, announced that the embassy in Cairo will close temporarily as of October. The ambassador said the decision has nothing to do with the long-standing dispute Ethiopia has had with Egypt and Sudan over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. In July, Ethiopia filled the controversial dam for the second time, despite Egyptian and Sudan's warnings against this before the 3 countries reached a final deal. The Horn of African nation is closing its embassy in Dublin, Ireland's capital, for similar reasons, with its responsibilities transferring to the country's mission in London. Now, relationship between Ethiopia and Ireland have not been very friendly in recent months. The Irish government has been at the forefront in pushing the UN Security Council to impose sanctions against Ethiopia with regard to the Tigray conflict. Following that, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government has been criticizing what it has called international interference in its internal matters. And then we conclude our news from the DRC, and former Congolese President Joseph Kabila could be in trouble after victims of his alleged misdeeds lodged a complaint at the International Criminal Court ICC accusing him of killing or torturing their relatives. The complaint, filed on September 16th, also targeted senior government officials in his regime, including Emmanuel Ramazani Shadari, a presidential candidate he supported in 2019 but who lost the election to Felix Tshisekedi. Mr. Shadari was Minister for Interior and Security. The complainants are relatives of victims of the 2016-2017 clashes between civilians and Congolese police and army officers in Kasai Central and Kasai provinces. The victims of what is commonly referred to as the Kamwina Nsapo rebellion, which started in 2016, have asked the ICC prosecutor to investigate in order to convict executioners and accomplices, but also to recognize the victims' right to compensation. They say Kasai was the scene of war crimes and crimes against humanity for 2 years. And that is the latest news from the continent of Africa. Well, I'm not surprised that there's a likelihood that there will be no election in Mali next year in February, as the army junta had promised when they removed, former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. So that is that. So I don't know what is their game plan at the end of this. The military, are they planning to hand over power to the people, a civilian government in Mali, or what are they planning really to do? That has not been made very clear. And the intentions at this point is not very clear. And as I was reading the news, there's the issue of Russian mercenary and French pulling out some of its troops from Mali and other countries across the Sahel region. And apparently they could use this, as an excuse as to why now perhaps the country is not very stable or is not in the best conducive, position to hold an election. So they could use that as an excuse not to have, the elections in February, among other excuses they will be willing to, to give so that those elections will not be held. I think what has happened is the army has tasted power, and I think they're enjoying it just a little bit too much, and they're not planning to give away, what is happening. But what I found to be interesting is this new game plan by the junta now in Guinea, remember, who removed President Alpha Conde on the 5th of September earlier this month. And so the junta has been meeting with different interest groups, church leaders, business people, name it. They've been meeting, political parties, religious organizations, diplomats, all people that are of interest in Mali. They've been trying to craft a way to move the country forward. So they've come up with a raft of measures, and they're apparently planning for the country to have an election next year, in June. I don't know why it has to wait for that long, but anyway, next year in June. So, the leader of that, who is now the interim president of Mali, Mamadi Doumbouya, he is the president following the coup earlier this month. So this is what he said, that they will have a council of comprising of 81 members, a ruling council. In Sudan, we do have a similar council, but we don't have that many people. We do have 6 people from the civilians, and then and then we do have 5 members from the military, and then 3 members from other holdout groups, rebels or something like that. So about how many people that we have in Sudan? About 14 for the caretaker, government, the transitional government in Sudan. But in Guinea, that is not the case. They're saying that they will have about, the council that they are planning to put together will have 81 members, and these members will be drawn from the society, including business leaders, political parties, religious organizations, diplomats, and professional organizations. And if these people who will be part of this council, none of them is allowed to participate in the upcoming elections when they'll decide to set this date. So that is one of the conditions. So if you have been elected or selected to be part of this transitional council, and you're part of the 81 members, and they're even drawing others from the political parties. So if you still have ambitions of running for any political seat come the next elections, so you cannot be part of this council that the military junta is putting together. So they're all barred from running the next local or national elections, any kind of elections in that country. I don't know until what time, but as for right now, if you're part of that council or you'll be selected to be part of that council, you cannot participate in any political election. And while they're doing that, in this election, 30% of the council members must be female. Why 30%? Why can't we have 50-50? We know places where we have a good number of women, because for us, we're able to look at things differently and, bring in some balance and some form of, I don't know, because we wear our hearts in our sleeves, so we're able to look at things differently. But nevertheless, they're saying the council must consist at least 30% must be female, and will include a president, 2 vice presidents. The council will decide on the strength of the period on the length of the period in which it will govern before an election can be held to usher a democratic government. The junta has been holding talks, as I've said recently, with people from all walks of life, and they've been trying to build consensus. I think so far they've really, they've really been able, in how they've been handling this matter, they were able to receive a lot of support even from people in Guinea. The whereabouts of now former President Alpha Conde is still not known. We don't know if he's okay. We don't know if, because they've not let him out, out of public yet. So I hope that he is fine. And so I will see how that will work out there for Guinea. If at all they will change their mind, or we'll see what is now happening in I think in what we are seeing happening now in Mali, where the military junta, James Bitoro, you're saying 30% is better than nothing. But it's not a favor now. What are you saying? It is not a favor. It is not a favor. I think we need more women, and we need to create more enabling environments where we can have a balanced way where members of the society can come in and participate in matters of national building, in matters of national interest, and in situations like this where, Guinea is putting up a council. We should have at least 50% of women in that. I stick to that, James. Thank you so much for watching this afternoon, and a very good afternoon to you. And all right, so that is that. No, the story of Sudan. And Sudan in April, they had talks with the Prime Minister of Israel, and there were talks that Sudan and Israel were to normalize their relationships. We know the relationship of Israel, the conflict, not relationship. The two countries don't really have a relationship, but the sour relationship, let me just say that has existed between Israel and Palestine has forced countries to take sides, and especially the Arab League or the Arab allied countries, right? They don't even want to be. It's just recently that we've seen them causing up to Israel, and so they've stand in solidarity with the country of Palestine, with what has been going on in East Jerusalem or the Gaza Strip or the occupied area. In that, if you know the story of Israel and Palestine, it's a long history. I'll not go into it. But we've seen in the recent past, especially in the last months of President Trump leaving office, has been try to have these countries open up and have relationships with Israel. And one of those countries was Sudan. And Sudan, one of the conditions that I think the U.S. put forth for them to be allowed to join the World Trade Organization, then you have to be friends with Israel. I don't know if that is even fair, but that was one of the conditions, of course. And another condition was for Sudan to pay the victims of the 1998 bomb attack that happened here in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. They happened at the same time, and we saw so many people die. A lot of Kenyans died, and a lot of other foreigners died, and others have forever been changed, injured, maimed by this, this incident. And that was the first time that Kenya, we had an experience with a terrorist attack in the country, okay? So the reason why Sudan is responsible is because this was organized by Al-Qaeda, whose leader then was Osama bin Laden, and Sudan had harbored Osama bin Laden in the early 90s. And so because of that, Sudan was put in a blacklist of countries that support terrorism. So that has gone to hurt Sudan so much. And so in the coming of this new regime, they've been trying to clean up their image and try to create and develop new diplomatic ties with the international communities, with the Western countries, and that had to come with a cost. And one of those is, we know Israel is your sworn-in enemy because you're standing in solidarity with Palestine, but nevertheless, be friends. Okay, if you want us to admit you to the World Trade Organization, and if you want to have dealings with the World Bank and those other international institutions, then you have to sort of do some of these things. And at the same time, please make sure you hand over Omar al-Bashir to the ICC, which they've said, they will. But I think it is the part of the civilian side. And as I read to you earlier, the military side did not agree to that. So there has been a tussle because the Transitional Council in Sudan is divided over that matter. So in a nutshell, I don't see Omar al-Bashir going to the ICC, and because of that, I don't see the army making it easier for the country to have a transition so that they could go have an election where a civilian will be solidly in power, and that might hand over Omar al-Bashir to the ICC. And you know the impact of that, the ramifications of that, it's a lot. There's a lot of the price tag there is very high because a lot of these generals will be implicated. So they have to protect themselves. And by protecting themselves, they have to make sure Omar al-Bashir does not go to The Hague, okay? So now, there has not been any new steps, to normalize the relationships between Sudan and Israel since these two countries made that announcement in April. But as we know, the parliament in Sudan was suspended. Constitution in Sudan was suspended in 2019. So what she said, the Foreign Affairs Minister said, is that once the new parliament comes to place, then they can deal with that matter, and they'll see if at all the country would want to normalize, the relationship between Israel and Sudan. And last year, Sudan joined countries like UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco in agreeing to normalize ties in Israel. We know right now the Arab world is deeply divided over whatever interest they have, and we've seen a lot of those divisions and even play out in Africa. And we've seen a lot of proxy wars in Africa, in a country like Somalia, in a country like even Sudan itself, and other countries. We've seen how that has played out. So we'll be looking at that. So there has been a spate of killings that have taken place in Nigeria, and just in the last, I think, 2 days alone, and about 60 people were killed in a wave of attacks in north part of the country. More than 30 villagers died in a raid by bandits. That was in Kaduna State. And criminal gangs attacked 5 towns and set a fire to a military camp in Sokoto. How do you set fire to a military camp in a country that calls itself democratic? And how does that even happen? And also in the northwest of the country. So 30 villagers were killed in Kaduna. That was one killing. And then there are others who were also killed. Criminal gangs attacked other 5 towns and set fire to the military camp. That was in Sokoto as well. And in that incident, they killed 17 members of the security forces and 2 civilians. So that is about 19 people added to the other 30. In the northeastern state of Borno, soldiers and vigilantes died when suspected Islamists fired rockets at their convoy and a military vehicle drove over explosive device. Like this happened in one night in Nigeria. And so in a total, more than 60 people were killed in Nigeria. I don't know until when. Nigerians will sit pretty and see this continue happening and not demanding for accountability from their chief of, forces, who is President, retired General Muhammadu Buhari. I don't understand why we've normalized killings, why we've normalized, banditry, why we've normalized children now not going to school in that part of the country because of the insecurity issues. And the rest of Nigeria is sitting. They don't know that it's happening, but it's coming down. And before you know it, it will be a pandemic in the whole country. All right. So it's a very sad state of affairs there in Nigeria. So I think I'll leave our conversation here this afternoon. James Bitoro, thank you so much. You're saying the world is not fair. I repeat again, we are not being done a favor. There still needs to be half of that council in Guinea. There needs to be women. I think there needs to be women there. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. And the rest of you, thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you here again tomorrow with more news from the continent of Africa. My name is Miriam Ogut. Bye-bye for now.
peace must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.